Today, we're diving into a story that's deeply personal and incredibly detailed. What we have is a collection of one person's private diary entries, their research notes, and even legal drafts. All of it pieces together this intense chronicle of one man's fight just to be heard, to be believed, when it felt like no one was listening.
And this is the question at the very heart of his writing. It really frames the whole story. This isn't just about a sequence of events. It's about a desperate plea for help and understanding, especially when the doubt is coming from the people you're supposed to trust the most.
So, where does this all begin? Well, according to his own documents, the timeline of strange, unsettling events really kicks off in 2023, and it seems to start right after new neighbors moved in next door.
Let's walk through the key moments he flags here. Things start to feel off in July when he gets back from a vacation. Right around the same time, a neighbor, David Jones, returns from rehab. But September 12th, that seems to be the real catalyst. A keyring with his apartment and grandmother's house keys just vanishes, poof, and then mysteriously reappears later that night. For him, this wasn't just a mistake, it was the start of what he describes as months of escalating harassment, leading him to ask his family for a lawyer and his own phone records by November.
In his notes, he talks about this creeping, unnerving feeling, like he was constantly being watched, constantly being listened to. He became convinced that his own reality was being messed with, so he decided he needed hard proof. He took matters into his own hands and installed cameras, hoping they would finally give him some answers.
And that decision to install cameras, it takes us right into the next phase of his story, the evidence gathering. He starts to meticulously document every single thing he sees as an act of harassment, whether it was happening in the real world or online.
One of the most detailed accounts he provides is about an incident of what he calls verbal harassment. It all went down in a local parking lot he calls mrbeast.
And the level of detail he recorded here is really something. He doesn't just name the person, he writes down the exact vehicle, a silver SUV, and even gets the license plate. He also notes that the guy stuck around for about 20 minutes after it happened. This really shows you how methodical he was being about collecting what he saw as verifiable evidence.
But the thing is, the mrbeast incident wasn't a one-off. His documents lay out what he saw as a clear pattern. We're talking slanderous rumors supposedly spread on a school bus by a neighbor's granddaughter, a friend getting intimidated over a parking spot, a constant stream of unwanted calls from anonymous VoIP numbers, and even a belief that his camera footage was being erased. He even documented a serious invasion of privacy, claiming a neighbor sent him an unsolicited explicit picture.
So, with all these things happening on the outside, you have to wonder what's going on inside. This brings us to his internal experience. He started doing his own research to try and understand the psychological tactics he felt were being used against him.
And the main concept he zeroes in on is gaslighting. Based on his research, he defines it as a manipulation tactic designed to make you doubt your own sanity, your own perception of reality. For him, this word became the lens through which he saw everything that was happening.
And this quote, directly from his notes, is, well, it's chilling. It shows just how far he was going to find proof. He describes using a voice amplification device and hearing these faint whispers, comments that, to him, were undeniable proof he was being watched and that they knew he was trying to catch them.
So he's thinking, how are they doing this? How are they listening? His research led him to a specific piece of tech. He started to believe a GSM bug, a tiny hidden listening device that works over a cell network, could be the explanation for how he was being monitored.
Living in this constant state of high alert, it clearly took a huge psychological toll, and he documented that too. His notes list classic symptoms of what he identified as trauma: constant anxiety, trouble sleeping, feeling numb and disconnected, and just pulling away from everyone. He directly connects all of this to the stress of his situation.
And that psychological strain was only made worse by what he describes as a total lack of support from the people who should have been in his corner. His writings are filled with his deep sense of being utterly alone, even within his own family.
He points to this one pivotal moment, a voicemail. He says his neighbor, Judy Rawlings, left a message on his father's phone saying he should be institutionalized. You can imagine, for him, this was a clear sign of what his neighbors were trying to do, paint him as unstable.
And this slide just perfectly illustrates the massive disconnect he was feeling. On one side, you have him documenting his own sadness, his trauma, and just begging for help. And on the other, the responses he says he got from his family, the silent treatment, having his concerns dismissed, being told to just solve it myself, and a refusal to help him get the evidence he felt he needed.
So, His research into legal matters led him to put a name to his family's actions or inactions. He started to frame it in legal terms, specifically obstruction of justice. He believed their unwillingness to help him get his own phone records was actively stopping him from getting to the truth.
So, feeling completely unheard by his family, he decided to turn to official channels. He began this very systematic campaign to get what he calls justice and validation from the outside world.
And you can see from his documents, he was methodical. He filed official complaints with federal agencies, the FTC, the FCC, the FBI. He went to the local police multiple times, turning over all the evidence he'd gathered. And finally, he started gearing up for a real legal fight by drafting his own civil complaint.
And here they are. These are the individuals he explicitly names in that draft complaint. He lists himself as the plaintiff against a group of neighbors and other people, making it crystal clear he intended to take them to court.
This quote, I think, really gets to the core of his motivation. He writes that knowing the absolute truth is the only thing that matters. It's the key that will unlock his next step, whether that's pressing charges or maybe seeking different kinds of help for himself. For him, the truth is everything.
So when you pull back and look at all these documents together, they tell one single, really powerful story. It's the story of one man's incredibly detailed and often painful journey to simply prove that his reality is real, all while facing what he sees as harassment and a giant wall of disbelief.
And it is absolutely crucial that we end on this point. Everything we've looked at today, every detail, every claim, it all comes from one person's perspective. This entire explainer is a direct reflection of his personal documents, his research, and his interpretation of events. We're presenting the narrative exactly as he recorded it. Which leaves us all with a final, really challenging question that gets to the core of this whole thing. It's a question for all of us to think about, really. When you feel like no one is listening, when your own reality is being questioned, how on earth do you prove your own truth?